Day 209 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as Russia's devastating invasion of Ukraine. Jozzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, we start off with the Russian military hardware and personnel losses in the last 24-hour reporting period. So we've got an additional about 200 additional Russian military personnel eliminations in the last day there. We'll then move across to the hardware, so an additional 4 armored combat vehicle losses, 4 tanks, always good to see, and 10 artillery. Oh, and we've got 1 aircraft down here as well. Also, just a quick look at my homegrown hobby of Ukrainian captured and working equipment. Now you'll see here there's quite the addition of working tanks in the last 24 hours. This is likely due to a backlog from the overwhelming amount of hardware that was captured during the recent successful Kharkiv counteroffensive by the Ukrainians. But this segment is a labor of love for me, and I expect the list to get much bigger, more accurate, and hugely more in-depth soon as well. Then we move back across to the map, and we'll start out in Kharkiv today, where after the recently liberated region, where the news has spread into Russia now about the failure and has reportedly inspired many Russian volunteers to refuse combat, so going into Ukraine, which therefore is causing some issues with Russian manpower. Now, there's actually not a great deal of news in the Kharkiv Oblast here today. We do have some information about the Oski River, actually much further down, isn't it? So right here, the Oski River, where it's said that Ukraine is starting to tighten control on some of the positions east of the Oski River. Now, although we are on the date map showing the 20th, it doesn't actually yet show this. It always is running a little bit behind. But I know some of you guys like the fun stuff, the loot. So I'll show you some of these for today, where we've got plenty of Ukrainian captured military hardware. For instance, we have a selection of captured Russian tanks from the recent Kharkiv counteroffensive. Now, there is 3 T-72B3 tanks. It's more of a modernized variant, and a T-80 tank as well. So this is just millions and millions of dollars worth of tanks just abandoned on the side of the road. And really, in one form or another, Russia could be considered Ukraine's #1 arms supplier. Also, we've got a photo of Ukrainian soldiers with a captured 2S19 SPG, so self-propelled artillery gun. And notice the cool Ghostbusters symbol on the side of this one. Very cool. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that I like some of the rare finds, like this very rare and advanced Russian 1v1 command and observation vehicle. It's not every day they come across one of these. Then we move down to the Donbass, or as I say, the ever-contested Donbass, where the Ukrainian armed forces keep attacking and pushing in the direction of Lyman right here with these 2 oinky pigs. But also, right next door to here, a little bit more northwest, there are some rumors about these towns here being liberated. Well, first of all, we've got a photo of the liberation of Yarova, but also these 2 guys here. In fact, this whole encircled area for Studenok and Sosnov. Now, in this fog of war, I prefer some photographic evidence first, but I'm not shy to mention something from the rumor mill, particularly when it's this close to the front line. Now, here's some interesting news that will help tell the story of the Donbass in a moment. So we have received some news that on the 16th of September, so a few days ago now, Russian units from two separate brigades got into a deadly shootout, friendly fire, so to speak, around the settlements of Shiplivka and to the left and right of here. Now, after one apparently accidentally fired on the other, it escalated. 21 Russian soldiers were killed and 53 wounded. Now, sometimes you take these stories with a bit of a grain of salt. It did seem to be some sort of a leaked information there, but this is around the front line. In fact, it is the front line area of the push forward from the Ukrainians. So if we zoom out a bit and we go back to, say, the 16th, we had more, 17th, we had more fortified positions here by the Russian side. But what happens when there's a break in the line? Go forward in time, something like that. This has also happened a little bit further down. See this area right here where it's the front line has been it's no longer vertical, it's been pushed in horizontally there. There was a breakout of a fight between the Russian Wagner group and regular Russian infantry a few weeks ago. And as soon as that story broke out, around the exact same time, there was a push here as well. So not a lot of uniformity amongst the ranks and the infantry there on the Russian side. And since we're at this part of the map, Yampol as well. This is actually, there's some intense fighting going on here as we speak. This Russian defensive position has got the makings of being surrounded though, if not already. Also, we'll zoom out a little bit for some context. So there was a Russian base also that was destroyed in Kadivka, right here. It's not the first time this has been shot upon by the Ukrainians, potentially a HIMARS as well. But just to give you a little bit more context in all of this, at the moment, what Russia seems to be doing in the Donbass right now is focusing on not losing any ground on more so the center region right here, where all these arrows are and oinky pigs are, as opposed to, say, the external edges like up the top, northwest, south a little bit there too, as they may be really pulling back, as they don't seem to have the manpower to engage in multiple large theatres of war at any single given time. And they may be starting to be honest with themselves now about that too. Oh, and speaking of manpower and lack thereof, and inability to hold certain lines, the Ukrainian General Staff advised that Russian proxies in the Donetsk Oblast, so around this region here, are seeking to mobilize 500 factory workers. So the Russian proxies cancelled the mobilization deferment for around 500 of these metallurgical factory workers. And I saw the town just before the started recording. It was around here. So there's a metal factory basically in this region, close to Russia in fact. So Russia is really pulling all the strings they can to get as many soldiers, really cannon fodder, onto the front line of the Donbass. Then we'll move across today to the Curson region, where there's always a bit of action here, particularly in this area right here. So the Russian-controlled Nova Kakhovka area, the dam, the river, north and south of it, where a Russian troop accumulation point was reportedly hit right here. I'm not surprised, though, about this report. It's happening at least every second day, sometimes every day. But related to that, really nearby, Ukrainian forces, in a separate report, sunk a Russian military barge on the Dnipro River here. Now, Ukrainian Southern Operational Command said the barge was loaded with military personnel, equipment, and weapons, and was attempting to cross the river near Nova Kakhovka and to the other side, so to Kozatsk. But in all honesty, exact same sort of thing happened about 2 weeks ago now. I remember they were going maybe along here, the Russian forces, and in all probability a HIMARS, high precision, quick off its feet, HIMARS system took them out as well. Now we'll move across on the map to the Crimean Peninsula, so the Russian-controlled Crimean Peninsula right here, where UK intelligence, United Kingdom intelligence, has said that the Russian Navy is relocating its submarines from the Sevastopol port here. And they're taking them all the way to Russia, so that would be possibly near this airfield. Now, the UK Defence Ministry said the security of the Russian Black Sea Fleet based in occupied Crimea has now been directly undermined. So, another Russian gesture of goodwill, perhaps they'll say. Or Russia may be concerned that Ukraine has now obtained some type of anti-submarine weaponry, like a torpedo, for instance. Or at the very least, a submarine detection equipment. Obviously something like sonar, but there are many multiple different types of submarine detection equipment types these days, beyond just sonar. And we'll move across to some of the news now, and this first one I consider quite newsworthy, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So the IWS has reported or analysed and found that the Ukrainian forces remain likely to regain much of, if not all of, the western Kherson Oblast in the coming weeks. Now, I wouldn't normally report on this potentially speculative military analysis, but the ISW just a couple of weeks ago, before the Kharkiv liberation, or most of the liberation there, said that the city of Kupiansk, which you might remember that city, would likely be liberated in about 2 weeks, they said. But the liberation actually happened about 24 to 36 hours later, so very, very soon thereafter. Now, always take these statements with a bit of a grain of salt, but it is very interesting nonetheless. And in other news, Germany is to send 4 more of its Panzerhaubitze 2000 howitzers to Ukraine, which will bring the total number supplied to 14. Now, Germany is copping a lot of flack at the moment for not sending tanks and not sending a whole bunch of things, or not being as supportive as they could be. Now, they are really the central power of Europe, of the biggest economic might. So they are said to be falling behind, but it's always good to see when they announce more things. Also, in other similarly related news, Slovenia has agreed to transfer 28 of its M55S tanks to Ukraine's. Now, this is an updated version of an older Soviet T-55 tank, so yeah, we're talking pretty old, to be honest. However, it's effectively the bones of an old T-55 tank with a new British main gun that utilizes armored piercing rounds and is compatible with other NATO rounds as well. It also has digitized internals, as you could guess, and an updated new 600 horsepower engine as well, to be a bit zippy. So, old bones, new brain, new muscle. And I said 28 of these in total. So what's actually happening here is Slovenia is sending these to Ukraine as part of a deal for Germany to send Slovenia in return 40 APCs, or actually more like ground vehicles. And in other highly important news, what I find to be very interesting is in an interview with PBS, so Turkish President Erdogan said that the Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to end the war in Ukraine as soon as possible. So they had a meeting recently, a little bit in the east, amongst several countries there, and this is what Erdogan says, that Putin wants to end the war as soon as possible. Erdogan also expressed to Russia that Russia should not be allowed to keep part of the captured Ukrainian territories, specifically referring to Crimea as well. But Russia, and in particular Putin, cannot be judged by his words. It really only comes down to actions, and I think the West is cluing into that. It's been the case for a long time now. And then a bit of a funny to round off the day with here. Well, I find it a little bit funny. So it's video footage of a Russian state media talk panel discussing the success or failure of the recent Kharkiv liberation by Ukraine. Now, one military analyst here seems to say Kharkiv doesn't matter. It didn't yield any real results for the Ukrainians. Then the host sort of cuts him off and fires back at him and says that that is erroneous and that Russia cannot get into the habit of believing its own lies. She actually said that. And probably what I found most funny about this video is the military analyst who is actually spending a lot of time trying to justify the losses in Kharkiv is in the actual source footage looking down and talking a lot. So he's talking to the host as he's looking down a lot, as if to just be reading off talking points from some preordained propagandist list of information that he's received. But more generally speaking, this is actually a major problem with propagandist states and controlled media outlets. They're willing to buy their own BS that is being churned out constantly. They're just used to it without even noticing their own house on fire. So that's about it for today, guys. Maybe a little bit of a shorter video today. So thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe. Only ignore those comments by the trolls unless you find them funny. And yeah, I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.